Why Elvis ended his relationship with Ann-Marget. Elvis Presley, often referred to as the King of Rock and Roll, was one of the most significant cultural icons of the 20th century. Born on January 8, 1935, in Tupelo, Mississippi, Elvis Aaron Presley was the son of Vernon and Gladys Presley. Raised in a modest, working-class family, Elvis grew up in the heart of the American South, where gospel music, country tunes, and blues deeply influenced him. From an early age, his love for music was evident. He would frequently sing at church and play the guitar, displaying an innate talent that would later catapult him to unprecedented fame. His humble beginnings played a pivotal role in shaping his persona, which would later resonate with millions of fans worldwide. Elvis' rise to fame began in the mid-1950s when he signed with Sun Records in Memphis, Tennessee. Under the guidance of producer Sam Phillips, Elvis blended country, blues, and rhythm and blues, creating a new sound that would soon be known as rock and roll. His first major hit, That's All Right, released in 1954, marked the birth of a new musical era. However, it was his explosive television appearances and live performances that solidified his place as a sensation. His gyrating hips, charismatic stage presence, and soulful voice made him both a teen heartthrob and a controversial figure. Parents and conservative groups were initially shocked by his provocative dance moves, while young audiences saw in Elvis a rebellious figure who challenged the status quo. This daring blend of sex appeal and musical innovation made Elvis a household name. By the late 1950s, Elvis' fame had skyrocketed, and he was already being dubbed the King of Rock and Roll. Hit singles like Heartbreak Hotel, Hound Dog, and Don't Be Cruel dominated the airwaves, and his popularity spread internationally. In 1956, Elvis made his first film, Love Me Tender, which showcased his acting talent and established him as a multifaceted entertainer. Over the years, Elvis would star in more than 30 movies, many of which, though commercially successful, were often criticized for their formulaic plots. Despite the mixed critical reception, these films cemented Elvis' place as one of Hollywood's biggest box office draws and contributed significantly to his global fame. Elvis' life took a dramatic turn in 1958 when he was drafted into the U.S. Army. His military service, which lasted 2 years, temporarily interrupted his career. However, his return to the entertainment world in 1960 was met with eager anticipation. The early 1960s saw Elvis transitioning from a rebellious rock and roll star to a more polished, mainstream performer. His music softened during this period, with hits like Can't Help Falling in Love and It's Now or Never, showcasing his versatility as a singer. He also continued to make films during this time, including Blue Hawaii and Viva Las Vegas, which remained fan favorites. By the late 1960s, however, Elvis faced new challenges. The rise of the British invasion, led by bands like the Beatles, shifted musical tastes, and Elvis' once dominant position in the music industry began to wane. But Elvis wasn't one to be easily forgotten. In 1968, he staged a major comeback with his famous television special, commonly referred to as the '68 Comeback Special. Dressed in black leather and performing in an intimate setting, Elvis reminded the world why he had become a legend in the first place. The special was a resounding success, reigniting his career and leading to a renewed focus on live performances. Elvis' return to live performance reached its peak with his Las Vegas residency in the early 1970s. Performing at the International Hotel, Elvis reinvented himself as a glitzy, larger-than-life performer, wearing extravagant jumpsuits and dazzling his audiences with both his voice and stage presence. His concerts were wildly successful, and his fame once again soared. Songs like Suspicious Minds and Burning Love became hits during this period, showcasing Elvis' ability to adapt to the evolving music scene. Unfortunately, as the 1970s progressed, the pressures of fame, personal struggles, and health issues began to take their toll on Elvis. He became increasingly dependent on prescription medications, which, along with a grueling tour schedule and personal turmoil, contributed to his declining health. Despite these challenges, Elvis continued to perform, with many of his concerts drawing large, enthusiastic crowds. However, behind the scenes, his life was unraveling. His once legendary energy and charisma were beginning to fade, and his physical appearance reflected the toll that years of hard living had taken on him. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, found himself at a crossroads in his tumultuous romantic life, caught between the allure of a stormy, passionate love affair and the stability of a more traditional, old-fashioned relationship. His heart was deeply divided, and the decision he faced was not just about love, but about the very nature of the life he wanted to lead. Elvis, ever the romantic idealist, knew that Ann-Margret, with her vibrant, whirlwind personality and career ambitions, was not quite the woman who would complement his desire for a more settled, domestic life. What he truly sought was someone who would be there for him, waiting patiently at home, embodying a kind of unwavering devotion that he felt was essential for the kind of life he envisioned for himself. In his eyes, Priscilla Beaulieu, whom he eventually married, perfectly fits this description of steadfastness and traditional values. Their relationship took a significant turn when, just a week after his marriage to Priscilla, Elvis sent Ann-Margret a guitar-shaped flower arrangement as a gesture of goodwill and perhaps as a final sign of his lingering affection. This act was both a sweet reminiscence and a subtle indication that the chapter with Ann-Margret was closing. However, the first cracks in the facade of Elvis and Ann-Margret's relationship became apparent during a crucial moment in their personal history. Ann-Margret was in England to promote her role in the film Viva Las Vegas, and the English press, ever keen on sensationalizing celebrity relationships, focused predominantly on her romance with Elvis. In interviews, Ann-Margret, known for her forthrightness, did not deny the relationship, leading to an explosion of headlines and articles that hinted at a possible engagement and impending marriage between the two. The media frenzy quickly spiraled out of control, painting a picture of an imminent union that was not aligned with the reality of their situation. Faced with the growing speculation, Ann-Margret reached out to Elvis to clarify that the press had exaggerated the situation. She assured him that her comments had been taken out of context and that the headlines did not reflect the true nature of their relationship. Elvis, already grappling with his domestic issues, was thrown into a state of confusion and distress. At home, his relationship with Priscilla was fraught with tension. They were embroiled in frequent, heated arguments, and Elvis, in moments of frustration, even threatened to send Priscilla back to Germany. The situation escalated to the point where Priscilla confided in her parents, who were outraged by the turmoil in her marriage. This intervention added another layer of pressure on Elvis, compounding his already conflicted feelings. Priscilla, on her part, tried to adapt to the demands and unpredictability of Elvis's world, striving to be the supportive partner he needed. However, the strain began to take a toll on her. She struggled with the idea of being in a relationship where such tumultuous emotions and uncertainties were commonplace. The conflict reached a critical juncture when Priscilla, feeling overwhelmed and disillusioned, decided she could no longer tolerate the ongoing instability. It was at this point that the Colonel, Elvis's manager, was pressured to intervene. The Colonel, along with others in Elvis's inner circle, advocated for Elvis to end his relationship with Ann-Margret and adhere to the promises he had made to Priscilla and her family. The time had come for Elvis to make a definitive choice. There was speculation among members of the Memphis Mafia, Elvis's entourage, that had Ann-Margret been willing to give up her burgeoning career and live a life more in line with Elvis's expectations, he might have chosen her over Priscilla. However, such a sacrifice was deemed too high a price for a young, successful star like Ann-Margret, who had her ambitions and career trajectory to consider. Suddenly, after a period of intense emotions and passionate connection, Elvis abruptly ceased communication with Ann-Margret. He did not return her calls, and she was left in a state of confusion and hurt. In a desperate attempt to understand what had gone wrong, Ann-Margret sent a telegram expressing her bewilderment. She had also released a single around this time and sought answers but received no response from Elvis. One day, she ran into a couple of Elvis's friends on Sunset Boulevard and, distressed, inquired about the situation. They could only offer vague explanations, acknowledging that such abrupt and unexplained actions were characteristic of Elvis's unpredictable nature. Despite the painful end to their romantic involvement, Elvis and Ann-Margret did not sever all ties. They managed to maintain a close friendship, albeit one that was fundamentally different from their past romance. They exchanged gifts and attended each other's performances, with Ann-Margret making a notable appearance at Elvis's comeback show in Las Vegas on July 31, 1969. Their friendship remained strong until Elvis's death, and Ann-Margret was among the mourners at his funeral in Memphis. Even today, Ann-Margret speaks highly of Elvis, defending his legacy against those who might ridicule him or his artistry. Her reflections offer a rare and personal insight into the man behind the myth, a perspective shared by few. Ann-Margret's continued admiration for Elvis underscores the complexity of their relationship and the deep respect she holds for him. Despite their separation and Elvis's eventual divorce from Priscilla, the bond between Elvis and Ann-Margret remained one of genuine affection and mutual respect. After Elvis's death, Priscilla admitted that while Elvis liked the idea of marriage, he may have struggled with the commitment required for a lifelong partnership. This admission reflects the ongoing complexity of Elvis's personal life and the difficult choices he faced in balancing his public persona with his private desires. On August 16, 1977, the world was shocked by the news of Elvis Presley's untimely death at the age of 42. He was found unresponsive at his Graceland mansion in Memphis, Tennessee. The official cause of death was heart failure, though it was widely known that his health had been compromised by drug abuse and other factors. The world mourned the loss of one of its most iconic and influential figures. Fans gathered outside Graceland in grief, and the legacy of the king was solidified.